I just watched Drem Scenario at the cinema and I had a great time. I thought it was very funny, very well made, and it reminded me that I had another film on my very long watch list by the same director, his first feature film called Sick of Myself. I've watched both of those together, and I think there's some great discussions to be had about how these films reflect each other, how they're different, and how they're quite similar. Let's get into it with first Drem Scenario, written and directed by Norwegian filmmaker Kristoffer Borligli. Everyone in the whole world starts dreaming of one man, an achingly boring university biology professor. Paul's pretty perfect life is interrupted as the world tries to explain this phenomenon, and Paul clumsily attempts to leverage the fame to fulfill his dreams of publishing a book. The film approaches the far-out concept in a really grounded way, providing some great humour as well as a bittersweet story of recognising what's really important in life. While this concept could have been a super broad mainstream comedy, I think it captures the concept of dreams in a really interesting way. They are presented as a mix of the fantastical meshing with everyday dullness, which feels more realistic than how dreams are often presented in a lot of film and TV shows. And at first, Paul does nothing in his dreams. He just stands there silently watching the action, a bit reflective of how Paul is a bit stationary in his own life, pining to be recognised and thinking about writing a book. And this idea of a lack of awareness of how the world sees you and how you desperately want to be seen by the world is brought to a whole new level in his first feature film, Sick of Myself. The story centres around Signe, a waiter who lives with her equally self-conceited boyfriend Thomas. Signe witnesses a brutal accident and winds up covered in blood, and as she walks back to her home, it's clear that she starts to relish in the attention that she received. She goes to an insane level where she starts to take a recalled black market sleeping pill that causes horrible side effects. She and her equally selfish artistic boyfriend Thomas are so desperate for attention and admiration, and it's great how it's explored in these two very distinct ways. Signe thinks that suffering will somehow lead to celebrity. She daydreams constantly about being various flavours of famous. Towards the end, she thinks the jig is up, and she imagines telling her journalist friend that it's all a hoax. Even after all these trials and tribulations, in this last fantastical story, she tells her friend that it's all a hoax, and then she releases a tell-all book and she becomes famous. But when she does reveal the truth to her journalistic friend, of course she is baffled and angry and wants nothing to do with her. It's sort of refreshing to have a down-to-the-core anti-hero protagonist. Maybe along the way, we as the audience think she might U-turn or find a redeeming quality and come clean, but she never does. Her artistic boyfriend is equally deluded and selfish. He gets his girlfriend to steal furniture, turns it into a noteworthy art, and never credits her. I guess we should be happy that he ends up in jail and she's alone with her strange support group, and that is certainly a refreshing and different type of feeling you get from watching a film. And there's a similar sad ending to Drem Scenario. Spoilers ahead, of course. After Paul loses everything, his wife leaves him, he's stuck promoting a cheap book and he's in a small apartment, Paul tries to use a new dream projecting device to implant himself into his estranged wife's dreams. Although Paul had no control over what happened to him and how he was portrayed in people's dreams, he did make several stupid and selfish decisions, all in the hope for some kind of recognition that perhaps he didn't actually deserve. With Signe in Sick of Myself, she was a young person with a pretty standard retail job, but Paul's life was pretty damn full before this all happened. He had a large, beautiful house, a university lecturing job, a loving wife and kids, and at the end, they are all gone. I'd thoroughly recommend watching both of these fantastic films. Thanks for watching.